Welcome, everyone. Good evening. Hope everyone is doing all right. This is Danny Haifong, your host. Joining me this evening is the first deputy permanent representative to the United Nations, Russia's first deputy permanent representative to the United Nations, Dmitry Polyanskiy. Thanks so much, Ambassador Polyanskiy, for joining me today. How are you?
Hello, Danny. I'm fine. How are you?
I am doing all right. For everybody who is coming into the stream, be sure to hit that like button to make sure more people come into the stream to listen to Ambassador Polanski. We have about 30 minutes with Ambassador Polanski, so we're going to get started. So, Ambassador Polanski, thanks so much again. The first question I wanted to ask you, we have a particular environment right now that is a pretty chaotic globally. And as a diplomat, I can imagine, especially a Russian diplomat, I can imagine that it isn't one that you look at fondly. We had Robert Fico of Slovakia. There was an assassination attempt on his life. It looks like he will live through the surgery. But there's also a lot happening with regard to Ukraine, which I know you have been following, commenting at the United Nations a lot on. We had the UK's defense minister, I believe Gregory Shapp, talking about how there will be NATO will never negotiate regarding Ukraine so long as any negotiations involve concessions to Russia. Just wanted your comment on the overall atmosphere for diplomacy right now from Russia's perspective, given the events that are transpiring globally.
Well, it's a big topic, of course. I will try to cover it in several sentences. The atmosphere is very tense, of course. I don't think there is much way to diplomacy right now, even especially if we speak about Ukrainian crisis. We had proposed several diplomatic openings. There were initiatives from other countries, but they were all rejected. And Ukraine and its Western sponsors are trying to promote the so-called Zelensky initiative, which is de facto a kind of ultimatum for Russia. And we absolutely see no reason even to discuss it, because first of all, we don't discuss ultimatums. Secondly, if you look at the situation at the battlefield, I think it's Ukraine that should be begging for some kind of concessions from Russia, if there were any negotiations, but there are none at this moment. So to impose something on Russia and to meet without Russia with several countries and proclaim it a summit of peace, this is the biggest degree of hypocrisy, I think. And it absolutely serves no peace efforts at all. You mentioned attempt of assassination of Prime Minister Fico. This is, of course, a very tragic situation. We are all following it with big emotions, and we all wish him speedy recovery, because he's a brave man. He is not afraid of speaking out and saying what he really thinks, even if a lot of people in his country do not share his position, and especially a lot of people in the EU and the West do not share his position. And I will not speculate on the circumstances because there is still investigation pending, and of course we need to wait for details. Though the attempted murderer is, I think, detained. But nevertheless, what is obvious already right now is that this is the atmosphere of hate and hate speech that led to this, and it's astonishing if you now look at social media on Twitter. If you try to scroll down beneath the comments of main actors or those who knows Mr. Fico, like Prime Minister Orban from Hungary, you will see how many hate speech there will be, especially from Ukrainians, threats, bad language, so everything. This is absolutely not the time for this, and this, of course, brings a lot of thoughts when you try to analyze it. So this, of course, didn't happen in vacuum. there were things that led to this, and I hope that Slovak authorities will investigate this. But the whole atmosphere, the whole reaction of Western society, of Ukrainian society to any alternative point of view, any other option than that the West and Ukraine wants, is nervous and full of hate speech, and this is quite obvious already at this stage.
Right, and I think those are great points, especially with regard to Prime Minister Fico. This atmosphere of, hey, we can't necessarily know exactly that it was a crime motivated by a particular political position that Prime Minister Fico took, but we know that he was one of the most controversial positions that he took in the eyes of the collective West, and his opposition was his stance on Ukraine, and of course the continued aid to Ukraine. He took a firm position against it, and that raised a lot of eyebrows in the collective West. And I had the honor to meet you at the United Nations when you were hosting a meeting about the ongoing arms that the collective West continues to give to Ukraine, and we never hear about it in the collective West media about how Russia in particular utilizes the United Nations for diplomacy oftentimes. And when I was there, when I spoke, and you may remember this, you have France,
Sure.
the UK, they often talk about how Russia is using the United Nations to just forward its interests and to continue its unjust war. Could you talk about how Russia actually uses the United Nations at the diplomatic level? Because this is just something that isn't covered by the collective West.
Well, the fact is that Security Council and United Nations as such remain at this stage one of very few universal accessible platforms which are not censored, because you know that in the West, in Ukraine, in the satellite countries of the West, another opinion and Russian opinion is already considered to be harmful, and it is banned. So I think it was Borrell who said that banning Russian TV channels is a fight for freedom of speech, which is very Orwellian, I would say. So they are afraid of us, they're afraid of our words, and Security Council platform is the one that we are using to promote truth about what's happening in Ukraine. And we also, this is our consistent policy, are trying to give this platform to people from this country, from other countries, with who are open-minded, who have opinion on what's happening, who are not brainwashed by mainstream media, and that's how you were there. And I think you can share your experience that we're not pressing on any of the briefers, we're not censoring, we are not giving ideas of what to speak about. And some of the statements that our invitees are making are maybe not 100% to our liking, which is normal. But they pronounce very important things, and they don't have any opportunity to speak from such an important platform unless Russia invites them. We made calculations that recently there were already 19 Americans and Europeans whom we invited to speak either through personal presence or through video link. So we are providing this platform. We are the only delegation who is doing so. And we also give facts about how the supplies of Western weapons affect the Ukrainian crisis. Actually, the situation right now is very simple. There is kind of a private military company called Ukraine, which doesn't have the no more arms of its own, and which is now starting to falter quite visibly because there are no people who want to fight voluntarily. And the West is pumping Ukraine up with weapons and trying to motivate Ukrainians to fight. The West is using Ukraine as a testing ground for its armaments. The West is using Ukraine as a dump field for the armaments that they don't want to use anymore. The West is gaining enormous money. The Western military companies are gaining enormous profits of the war in Ukraine. And I think that they would be the last actors who would really give green light to any kind of negotiations if the West ever decides to push Zelensky or I don't know who else for real negotiations, because they are losing profits. They are not interested in that, and that's how it happens. The Ukrainian defense is now crumbling, and it's quite clear that Russian troops are advancing, because we made several proposals on how this thing can be settled peacefully. We were ignored. The most important push, as you know, was made immediately after the start of our special military operation, when our troops were several kilometers from Kiev, and there were meaningful negotiations first in Minsk and then in Istanbul, and the draft treaty was already initialed. But at the last moment, this is already an open secret, the intervention of some Western leaders, particularly Boris Johnson, made a decisive turn, and they talked Zelensky out of signing any agreements with Russia, convincing him that with the help of Western